Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We're in conjunction with Resilient Kids and Youth Project. My name is Nathan, and today with me we have a mental health social worker, Felicity.
Hi, everyone.
So, Felicity, what are we talking about today? What's our topic, please?
So today we're going to be chatting a bit about 4 ways to connect with your teenagers.
Oh, fantastic. Very warranted and needed conversation to be had in community these days. So why is it an important topic? And can you just unpack that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, so it is a really important topic to talk about because as we all know, or anyone who's been around teens, had teens of their own, worked with them, it can be challenging. Communicating with teens and young people has its different challenges to communicating with children and then communicating with adults. Like, it's quite different. So during these years, our teenagers' brains are developing at a really, really rapid pace. They're going through a lot of changes. So some we see on the outside and we're all pretty familiar with, but most of these happen internally. And it's a huge adjustment for them to go through that really centers around independence, finding independence from their family, and finding their own identity from their family. So there's a big focus on peer relationships. It's also sort of where we start to see some of those behaviors where they're wanting a bit more privacy from their parents, they're wanting to spend more time with their friends, they're more assertive in communicating their opinions, which can come across as a bit combative sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of parents have had the experience of feeling like their teenager just argues with every single thing they say. So it's an important topic to look at because engaging with your teen in a healthy way can really help minimize the conflict at home. And it really helps them develop into well-adjusted, resilient young adults who can then form their own healthy family relationships as they grow up. Reduces the likelihood of mental illnesses later in life. And yeah, a good parent-teen relationship definitely doesn't mean one without conflict, but we want it to be more healthy conflict. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Nathan.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, it's nice to have that idea of healthy conflict in there because obviously, in time it will happen throughout our lives. And myself growing up as a teenager now to an adult, I know that I had that in my past as well with my parents, and probably everyone does at different times. So thank you for that. I agree with what you said there in working with teenagers over my time in different roles. Independence is a massive part of their development, and also a key function in being involved in society and that type of stuff, and being able to provide, I was going to say students, but young teens with the idea that they actually take responsibility for different tasks. So I used to work in hiking and that type of stuff. So allowing a student to actually lead a hike provided them an opportunity to show that independence and take ownership over their decisions. And that then led them to have a great peer support. They were able to interact with their friends better, and also with the other leaders. So I thought also, just to finish on that little point there, of the idea of being real as a parent, as a older person or older person in community, just to make sure we show that we make mistakes, and that's okay, and that we can bounce back from them, which is a part of that resiliency you talk on as well. So going on from that, Felicity, what are some practical ways we can address or discuss these issues?
Yeah, so the first one we probably want to look at is really balancing that need that they have for independence and identity forming with boundaries. So it's always going to be a bit of a challenging space, and takes practice to sort of work out what the right boundaries and what the right level of independence is for you and your teen.
Yeah.
But it's a really crucial one. So the way teens develop a sense of identity and develop a sense of independence is to practice in the home environment. So we really want to try and facilitate that within some constraints. So probably an easy example to think of is if you've got boundaries that you need to have in at home. So we've all got expectations that teenagers would start helping with chores, all those sorts of things, that maybe we have a family dinner scheduled every night and that's not negotiable. There's no phones. All those sort of things start to come into it. But sitting down with your teenager and really involving them in setting those boundaries and setting those expectations can make a big difference to the household. So it allows them to have some say in what they think is appropriate.
Yeah.
Can be really helpful to just ask them, say, look, we need to have some boundaries around screen time, using our phones. What do you think is reasonable for me to expect? And remember that I'm the parent, so 24/7 screen time is not going to be the answer we're going to land on. And then go through a bit of a dialogue and really sort of have a conversation about what's going to work. Get them involved in setting consequences or helping you come up with consequences for sort of breaking the rules, or if they don't follow the expectations that you've all set together. You tend to have a much greater chance of success if they've been involved in setting consequences, setting boundaries and expectations. And it's a nice way to connect with your teenager. It may feel a bit awkward to sit down and do something like that, but it really sets you up for success there.
Yeah, good. I guess going on from that, the idea of the parent being in charge, or not in charge, but like having the dialogue with the teen, this sometimes means that the parent needs to make sure that they're able to have those rules, and sometimes they may look like they're the bad person. That they can't just be the friend all the time of the teen, and that can be a hard balance as well. Of like, I want to be friends because I want to have these conversations, but also how do I balance that idea of I need to be able to hold that space and become, it could be the bad parent or whatever it may be because I'm making some of the rules. But I suppose having that dialogue of let's work this out together, will that help it, or how do you see that kind of working together to make the relationship flourish more without just being friends and then having a grey area, I suppose?
Look, I think that's a really good point and a really good topic to sort of talk about, because it is such a balancing act. Like, parenting would be much easier if we could all just be friends with our kids. It'd be easy, and we wouldn't have webinars like this because there'd be no need to. But in those teen years, structure and boundaries really provides a lot of security. So I can almost guarantee they won't thank you for setting rules and they won't enjoy them, but that's what they really need you to do as their parent. It's one of the things that makes parenting really challenging, but also really rewarding, because you're really investing in helping them develop as a person. It does mean you have to be the bad guy sometimes, and they'll be angry with you sometimes, and that's part of it. They'll settle and they'll learn to sort of follow those rules, but keeping in mind that teenagers, their whole developmental task at the moment is pushing boundaries. So they need something to push against. They need you to say, no, that's not okay. or we talked about this and we'd agreed on this. I spoke to you like an adult, and this is what we came up with together. So you're still giving them a bit of sense of agency and choice,
Yep.
but coming back to that boundary of, look, at the end of the day, this is what we decided, and this is what we have to deal with.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's, I suppose, the whole idea of providing them the space to start making these decisions, because as young teenagers, we always want to have more independence, as we said earlier, and make these decisions and take control of our lives and our own little bubble. And when we have our parents or school teachers and that type of stuff coming in on our bubble, sometimes it can be a bit hard, but being able to understand that that's a part of growing up and having those discussions will be very healthy. So what's another way we can work on and connect with our teens as they're going through life?
So another way is using our healthy communication skills, and this does sort of apply to communicating with anyone, but there's probably elements of it that are more useful communicating with teens. They're all very simple concepts, healthy communication, but it's much easier to describe than to do in practice.
Yes.
I'm sure we've all slipped up with our communication at various points and will continue to do so. So we really want to have the underlying idea with our communication that it's really about compassion, respect, and it's judgment free, which is more challenging than it sounds. A big part of speaking to teenagers is learning to change how you're speaking and start to speak to them like an adult, to give them that practice of being treated like an adult. So as we've sort of mentioned, it's a bit of a stage where they're going to be developing their own views and opinions and values. So a big sort of key part of healthy communication for that stage is really trying to let them know that even though you don't agree with an opinion that they have, you can still respect that opinion. So we can do this by doing things like having them asking what their view on something is, giving them the time and the space to tell you all their reasoning. We can ask questions, say, oh, okay, can you tell me a bit more about why you think that? Or just take an approach of curiosity. And then it's very tempting to jump in and then express your opinion, particularly if it's a different opinion. But sometimes it can be helpful to add in a little step of sort of really validating what they've said to you. So that might be rephrasing what they've said and saying, oh, look, I don't really agree. I think I have a different opinion, but I can see how you've come to think that, or I can see why that's really important to you. Can I share my opinion or what I think about this topic? So sort of supporting that idea that you can both have completely different opinions and not agree, but it doesn't mean anything about your relationship. It doesn't take away love or care or support that you have for them. So often doing things like using some active listening skills, which are things like eye contact, turning to face someone when they're talking to you. So really showing your team that you're giving them your undivided attention and you want to hear what they want to tell you. Sometimes it's helpful to sort of do an activity together where it's something you're both interested in doing, but you don't need to maintain that eye contact. So if you're gardening or cooking or whatever you're doing together, driving is often a big one. It can make it a little bit of an easier space for your young person to sort of have those conversations with you that they might otherwise feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about.
Yeah.
And always, we always come back to wanting to stay away from sort of any criticism. Young people in particular are really, really attuned to um, judgment or criticism, and they'll be looking out for cues for how you respond to things that they say. So, even being really aware of what your expression is doing, you might not be judging them, but they might be looking at your face and perceiving something that's not there and saying, "Oh, yeah, no, you definitely don't think I'm saying the right thing," or that sort of thing. Um, so we want to stay away from those sort of things and stick with nodding or just that sense of curiosity, avoiding things like sarcasm or comparing them to their peers or siblings, because they are sort of on alert for that sort of thing a little bit more during these years.
Yeah, nice. I mean, listening to that and you talk about the curiosity, it's like maybe think about my nieces and talking with my nieces. My niece is asking why and why and why all the time. And sometimes that can become annoying, but like as a parent, that's one way of like not just saying why all the time, but asking questions like a child would. It's kind of like reframing, oh, I need to go back into a child's kind of mentality to try and learn what the
Mm.
teenager is actually wanting to express. Because sometimes, we as humans can't express, as you've talked about, what's going on by words because we're frustrated or whatever may be happening. So that's it's really cool to kind of flip the coin there, I suppose, in that idea. And I suppose another one, I don't know if you mentioned it, but like, parents, you hear so many times of, oh, when I was your age, I did this, this, and this. How does that type of thing affect teenagers? What are your thoughts there?
Um, Unfortunately, even when our intentions are really good and we're trying to sort of help them learn from our experiences, or um, we're trying to give them another perspective, often teenagers won't take it that way,
Mhm.
and they can find it to just come across as judgmental or dismissive of how they feel. So it's really one we want to stay away from,
Yeah.
generally speaking. Like there are situations where it might be helpful, particularly if they ask you um, for what things were like when you were their age or any sort of thing like that. That's a bit of a different story, but um, they're in that sort of state where they're comparing themselves to other people constantly in the
Mm.
way they look, the way they act. They're trying to decide who they want to model themselves after. And all of this is happening subconsciously. So they don't know that they're doing this necessarily. But um, yeah, we want to stay away from comparison generally. Um, but I really like what you're saying, Nathan, about that sort of why that comes from younger younger children, or as they're sort of growing up and exploring ideas. Often when teens are communicating, they might not have even thought through their opinion
Mm.
that much, and they're using that conversation to really form their opinion. So they might come at you with a really strong opinion one day, and you speak to them a week later and they feel a completely different way about that same topic, and that's just their brain processing and making those sort of decisions. And it's a really important thing to have those conversations.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. Um, Going on from there, as a parent, how do we show that we're trying to meet them where they are and not just talk down to them all the time? So you touched on a few things there a little bit, but like, yeah, just is there any ways that we can kind of get on their level per se to really engage with them?
Yeah, so probably one of the easiest ways and one of the first things we look at doing is engaging with their interests. So that's it's really important to take an interest in things they like or things that they're sort of learning about or exploring, and ask some questions about it, or make time to do those sorts of activities with them. And maybe that's time where it's just the two of you or just the family. Um, really, it's a it's a really significant thing for them to feel, that you notice what they're doing and what they enjoy, and because those things make up who they are as a person.
Mhm.
Um, so can also help to do things like, um, showing sort of unconditional love and support, telling them explicitly that, um, you think they're really great at something, or you're proud of them, or you love them, or giving them that really verbal praise can be really important, even if you're pretty confident that they know that you love them.
Yeah.
And even if you get the, typical teen response of, "Oh, mum, don't say that," or "You're embarrassing me," that that praise is really important to encourage them to sort of keep exploring different activities and different parts of their life. And it's a really nice way that you can be involved and be a part of your teenager's life rather than just sitting in that boundary setting parent role. It's a bit more fun, and you want to be able to have fun with your teenagers sometimes.
Definitely, fun is good to have. So that's fantastic. We've touched on like a lot of focused on how to interact and communicate with our teens. What about looking after the parents themselves? How do we care for ourselves as parents, to make sure that as the journey goes on with their teens, we can continually be there for their teens and like support them, even though we have our own problems going on to our side.
This is actually a really important question to ask, because it is such a big part of supporting teenagers and going through that journey. Um, Being kind to yourself as a parent is a really significant thing to do. So, as we sort of said all throughout this presentation, it's not an easy job parenting teenagers, no matter who you are or how much research you've done, how much practice you've had. No one's going to do it perfectly. Um, if there was a perfect, smooth, easy way to do it, we
Mm.
would have a book about it that every parent would get, and we'd all just follow the book, and whoever wrote the book would be a billionaire by now. Um, but we don't, because it's the nature of that developmental stage. So noticing that, is really important, and noticing that you have to really check in with yourself,
Mm.
to see how you're going so that you can be that supportive parent. Um, Remembering those little things, like teenagers have mood fluctuations. They aren't always good at sort of regulating their emotions. They'll lash out, they'll get angry sometimes. And often, as the parent, that will come towards you, um, because you're there and because they know that you'll be there regardless. Um, so, coming back and remembering that it's not always actually about you. It's probably something else that's going on for them. Their
Yeah.
mood will fluctuate and come back down to a good mood later on, and they won't give it a second thought, even if it's something that really hurt you at the time. Um, so doing things like just watching your own well-being, so noticing when you've had a particularly difficult day, like if work's been really difficult and then everything that could go wrong has gone wrong and you're feeling frustrated, maybe trying to get dinner ready, having a difficult conversation with your teenager is probably not the best choice on that day.
Mm.
That's where you're going, no, look, I'm not in a state to want to deal with this today. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to get what I need to done. And then maybe I'm going to go and read a book or do something that's just for you to give you a bit of space. And the other key part of sort of being kind to yourself is knowing that it's okay to find it hard. It's okay to ask for help if it's getting really hard. Plenty of people go through those phases as their children are growing up. I would say most people have a point where they go, "Oh no, this is too much. This is too hard to do."
That's good. That's fantastic. Thanks for those tips there. And I was just thinking through things then, and as you stopped, I was like, "Oh, I've just gone absolutely blank on what I was about to say." But yeah, thanks for and I suppose looking after your parents, looking after yourself is a massive thing. But that's what it was. So the idea of when talking with, like, this is the thought that came to my mind, was when talking with your teens about any rules or that type of stuff. Maybe the idea of, these are my boundaries. If I'm not having a good day, don't expect this decision to be made straight away. So at least the teen knows what the expectation is going forward when they're in a good, healthy state themselves. Like, obviously, if they've flipped their lid and they're really angry at you, they're not going to be able to listen to what the rules are going to be anyway. But if you have a conversation when both parties are relaxed and, just having a nice conversation about it, then they'll help set things up so that when the parent needs to look after themselves, and as you say, just say, look, at the moment, this is not a good time, that maybe that's a good way of bringing those boundaries in, because you're showing good self-care to your teen, which is not always shown in society. So if we can actually implement that in our lives as a parent looking towards our kids, then that's role modeling some good stuff. And as you brought back to earlier on today, you talked about that as well, of they learn by watching and listening and that type of stuff. So if we can role model these things, that would be fantastic. We're running out of time today, which has been fantastic. We could talk all day with your knowledge. It's fantastic. But if a parent out there is having any troubles that's at a high escalation, or anything that's out of they can't manage themselves, where would you kind of point them to and that type of stuff, just to wrap up here?
Yeah, so I mean, that's really good thing to look out for, and noticing when there's a point where you're feeling a bit unsure if it's just teenage moodiness or just those teen years, or whether it's something more serious. It You don't have to know for certain, but reaching out for a bit of support and just to check in about that can be really helpful. So, I mean, you're always welcome to reach out to Outback Futures, even if that's just for a conversation, to say, hey, look, this is what I'm noticing. Like, should I be concerned, or that sort of thing. There's services like Parent Line, which can be really helpful, where you give them a call. They're really used to working with young people, and particularly parents supporting young people. So arming yourself with information,
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable talking to the GP about it, can always be helpful, or eHeadspace. A lot of people will connect through there, and with the idea that they might link you in with some other resources, so you can sort of start to get a better idea. But it is really important to reach out and ask those questions if you have them, rather than sit there and feel concerned and not able to do anything.
Yeah, and the worst thing I suppose that can happen is a paralysis of no action at all. Like, if you just give your GP a call, at least you're making some progress forward, and you're doing the best you can for your teenager.
You can, sorry, just to add one more thing, it can also be helpful to try and talk to your young person. So
Yeah,
they may not be receptive to that, but to go in and say, hey, look, I've noticed this and I'm really worried. Is everything okay? Or do you want to talk about anything? They may completely shut you down and say, no, leave me alone. But leaving them with the message that that's okay, you have your space, but I'm just downstairs if you need to talk, or letting them know that that door's open for them if they want to come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nathan, you keep going.
Fantastic. No, we're going to wrap up now. So if you need any more help or wanted to get in touch with us, look at outbackfutures.org.au to reach out to us, or that might be a call phone number there as well. But Felicity, thank you so much for your time and blessing us with the information. Hopefully a lot of people can find this very helpful. So thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of today for yourself. Bye.